Hey guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to the desktop for another Retro Books, and this time I would like to present this, the Star Trek Mr. Scott's Guide to the Enterprise from 1987. Now, I've decided to cover this for two reasons. Firstly, because earlier this week I covered an adventure from FASA for the Star Trek role-playing game, a Doomsday like any other. Now, FASA provided lots of background information on the Star Trek universe, and much like the early Star Wars novels used the West End Games role-playing game as source material, this book and a number of other books of its period used the FASA role-playing game as their background information. So a lot of the information in this book is based on the FASA version of the universe, which is very, very different to the universe that was extended in Star Trek Next Generation and other sources. So it makes this book really quite out of date in a weird way. But also because it's been brought to my attention, because this book sits on the shelf opposite my desk that I work at, and both in my personal and my work email accounts, I've been receiving dozens of emails recently from a Shane Johnson. And every time I saw the email come in, it's sort of spam email about sort of marketing websites, but every time I saw it, I'd think of this book, because it's sitting opposite me. So I decided to look up the author. Now, Shane Johnson is not the same Shane Johnson that's been emailing me, because Shane Johnson went through some health issues in 2007 and ended up transitioning, and is now Laura Johnson. So I hope they're living their best life, because they created this book that I absolutely adore. So I hope she's having a great time. I hope her health has got far better. But let's have a look at the back cover. So, Star Trek, Mr. Scott's Guide to the Enterprise. Aided by the logbooks of Chief Engineer Montgomery Scott and recently declassified Starfleet material, Shane Johnson has written the most accurate, in-depth look at the U.S.S. Enterprise available. For the first time anywhere, deck by deck, in full fascinating detail, you will tour the inside of the U.S.S. Enterprise, the United Federation of Planets' most recognized intragalactic ambassador. Using dozens of blueprints, sketches, and photographs, you'll visit the on-ship sites of Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock, and Commander Scott's most famous adventures, and take a never-before-revealed peek at the inner workings of a starship. From the engineering room to the captain's quarters, from sickbay to auxiliary control, here's your complete guide to the most famous starship of all, the U.S.S. Enterprise. And apparently I bought this in a Virgin Megastore for $6.95, which would be an absolutely lovely price to pick up a book of this size. And inside, well, it's laid out like a sort of technical journal, and it's got some lovely pictures inside from the movies. The acknowledgements, the introduction, and it greets you as it's written from in-universe. So it's Mr. Scott providing information for people just boarding the Enterprise's crew for how things work, because this is the post-refit, the movie era Enterprise. So things are very different from starships they might have worked on before. So we've got the history of the refit here, talking through how Montgomery Scott and Mr. Spock designed a number of technologies and refitted the ship. You know, how they separated the neck from the body so they could add the torpedo bay around it, the nacelles got completely replaced, etc. And after going through the refit, we've got some absolutely gorgeous diagrams of the Enterprise. Now, I absolutely adore this Enterprise. I think it's possibly the most beautiful version of the starship. Pike's one is very, very nice, but this is absolutely gorgeous. It's swan-like to me because it's very white. I've got the deck plans there, laid out where everything is. Contractor sketches showing alternate versions of the impulse engine housings. Sketches there for how the windows would look out. These windows are the ones I think used in the movies, but these look a lot more like the modern ones, which is interesting. Go through a section on uniforms. These are the uniforms as used from Wrath of Khan onwards. They handily skip over the motion picture pajamas. And the cadet jumpsuits, the rank pins shown, service bars with how long, the different fonts used, the typefaces on parts. We've We've got graphics labels, so you can identify what parts of the ship. So we've got science officer, chief engineer, the communications, command, science, medical, engineering, weapons and defense sections, so you can tell where you are on the ship, transporters, shipboard services, environmental engineering. Directory, so showing how turbo lifts are labelled, FASA battle games, three-dimensional chess, light cube games, cargo facilities. All the iconography used in the movies. And then we go on to the A deck, so we start at the top of the ship and work our way down, showing the layout of it with the 2 turbo lifts shown in the movies, all the different positions. We go into the docking ports, because of course there's one on the back of the bridge section. And we go through where they are positioned on the ship, how the hooks connect the travel pods and shuttlecraft to them, what the docking ports look like from the outside, what they look from the inside with different spacesuit lockers, interior airlocks, etc. Then we move to the B and C decks, with a VIP officer's lounge at the front of the ship with the large windows looking out from under where the bridge is. Turbo lift shafts, dining areas, the kitchens. Meal services, so a suggested list of food types you can get from the food processors, because this isn't the Enterprise D, they don't have replicators which can create absolutely everything, but they do have a variety of different foodstuffs. D&E with the VIP staterooms. So the quarters used by visitors and ambassadors and things visiting the ship. Junior officers' quarters, senior officers' quarters. We've got crew quarters, much smaller. We go down to F deck. The turbo lifts, personnel hatch airlocks, which go onto the outside of the ship on the top of the saucer. They use one of those in Star Trek Motion Picture. Main gangway hatch, so there's a large airlock at the side, so when the ship docks, people can easily get access to the ship, boarding it and exiting it without having to use the transporters or shuttlecraft. The auxiliary control room, something not shown in the movies, but was shown in the original series, and Next Gen reintroduced it. Now this is a kind of weird layout where the captain seems to be facing backwards and there's people stationed around the computer core behind him. One of the things I really like is the corridor redesign, because they are these segmented panels, but it shows what's stored behind them. So the storage cabinets, emergency survival compartments. So each section of the corridor hatches can seal off, and you've got survival materials, so every part of the ship can act as a survival boat or survival area. So you've got the briefing rooms with a wonderfully weird shaped table that they used in the original series. Sick bay, showing the number of intensive care areas, the chief surgeon's office. Transporter rooms with the glass screen used in the movie era Enterprise. We've got field jackets for excursions off the ship. Communicators and tricorders, talks through the armory and the phasers. So we've got the type of phaser used in the motion picture, where the top section can come off and the pistol connects below. But then the more traditional, where this part is the smaller phaser, which can be used separately, and this entire section is added on to make it a more powerful weapon. It doesn't go onto rifles or anything, because obviously they're not shown in the movies. Got the recreation deck, which was shown in the motion picture but not really used anywhere else. A large area for the crew to gather and entertain themselves. Docking port complexes, showing all the departure lounges, toilets, spacesuit lockers, used when you're awaiting a shuttlecraft or a travel pod. Photon launch system, so it goes through the layout of the photon torpedo area. I thought there'd be one of these rails for each of the launchers, but there's just one shared between. I'm guessing you can queue up torpedoes in this area, ready for firing, so you can fire more torpedoes. Goes through the photon torpedoes themselves, and then we're on to engineering, showing off the long energizer chamber, or intermix chamber, sorry, the horizontal intermix chamber, which goes off, and you can see it going up to the engines through the pylons. Obviously, that isn't quite the angle of them, but given this is forced perspective, they built this as a proper set and then used children in spacesuits in the distance to give you the idea that this is a much larger room when they filmed it. Got the radiation suits the engineers wear. Onto the landing bay and cargo handling facilities. The shuttlecraft, as used in the motion picture, can connect to the gravity sled. I believe it's shown somewhere for warp travel. The travel pods, used in the first couple of movies. Work bees. I love the little logo for them. And these work bees were used on much later movies. I think you actually see them as far as Next Generation. Little EVA vehicles with grasping arms. Somewhat like the pods in 2001: A Space Odyssey, but you can see these fit up to cargo pods and are used for moving things around outside a starship. We've gone to how the lifeboats, we've got the instructions for them, and then the lifeboat elevations, what they're like inside and out. Cargo transporters, for moving large amounts of things on and off the ship. The botanical gardens, which seems a bit luxurious for what's basically a military vessel. And then we move on, because as this book shows on the cover, includes material from Star Trek 4. So I'm guessing when this was written, it was during Star Trek 2 and 3, and then the Enterprise is destroyed. But they get a new one at the end of Star Trek 4, the Enterprise A. And this kind of makes up that it was the U.S.S. Tai-Ho, which had just been finished, so they relabeled it Enterprise to give it to Kirk. But there's all sorts of other versions of it. I believe it was the Yorktown or something. Properly, they talk about it having transwarp drive like the Excelsior, but obviously that isn't mentioned anywhere in the movies. But we show the much brighter bridge shown at the end of Star Trek 4. The dedication plaque, more photographs. We get some bridge display graphics. The different screens shown around the bridge, and then a nice glamour shot of the Enterprise A showing off its serial number, ship's directory, index, and the United Federation of Planets logo. Now, I love this book. I've always been a sucker for blueprints and that kind of thing, which is why I have so many of these types of books. But I believe this was the first one I got. There's a Star Trek book which came out before that, which documented different starships and technology from the original series. But I never picked that up until a few years after I got this one. This was the first one I got, and I absolutely adored it. The way it talks to you in the text sections that you are coming aboard as a crew, and it's acclimatizing you to the new technologies and how the ship works differently to the more traditional ones. And so many absolutely excellent diagrams. I cannot praise this book highly enough. Anyway, I think I've whittled on for quite long enough, so thank you very, very much for watching. But as always, most of all, you look after yourselves, and I'll catch you later. Bye now.